Okay, Derbyites, we are days away from the 2014 Emmy Awards, and we're all fixing and tweaking our predictions, and just when you think you've got a race nailed down, like Best Drama Actor, all of a sudden you have these second thoughts. And I had one of those eureka moments last night at 1 in the morning up here at my cabin in the Pocono Mountains, and I ditched Matthew McConaughey for Bryan Cranston. More on that in a minute. Chris Beachum, Paul Sheehan, you first, Chris. You currently have McConaughey in first place, and I want you both to explain why, and then I'm going to come back and annihilate your predictions. That's a promise. Chris, go first.
Well, you know, there are several categories this year where I'm just stumped, and every time I make a decision, 2 nights later I can't sleep because I want to change, but this is not one of them. I've had Matthew McConaughey in first ever since probably about the 2nd or 3rd episode aired. There are certain categories I'm just not going to second-guess myself. I would rather be wrong with the right reasons than worry over every single category because it's just not worth it. But McConaughey, if he only had his episode, I might be a little leery because the finale was so action-packed, even though he does have a really great speech at the end. But he also has Harrelson's episode, which gives him that normal, in the room with the 2 detectives, just, you know, monologue after monologue, ripping up the can. That's what I thought the voters would most go for, and he gets that on Woody's episode. And then he gets to be a hero on his own episode. I'm just not going to second-guess this category.
Well, that's a lousy reason for that prediction. Paul, can you do any better than that?
Well, listen, I mean, Emmys aren't my milieu, really, and I listen to you guys every year, and every year it's all about the episodes. They've got to pick the right episodes, and then when the people that you think should win don't win, you say, they didn't watch the episodes. So you know what? I'm going to say in this instance, you've got a show, Breaking Bad, that was over more than a year ago. These voters saw it, been there, done that. They're not looking at those episodes in this summer. And they watched True Detective because everyone was watching True Detective back in the spring. This is a category where I don't think they're particularly paying much attention to the episodes. They want to see Matthew McConaughey come up there and deliver a speech just like they watched him do on the Oscars this year. That's the reason why I'm sticking with McConaughey. Last year, I was all for Bryan Cranston. Breaking Bad was everywhere, and he couldn't win. He couldn't beat Jeff Daniels last year. I don't see how, if he can't beat Jeff Daniels, he could possibly beat the Man of the Year, Matthew McConaughey. I mean, he's got his Oscar for Dallas Buyers Clubs. He's all over the movie theaters right now with the coming attraction for Interstellar. You know, it's just this big-time movie star coming to the TV Academy. They can't help but give him. They're not going to be slapping that stud, Tom.
Well, last year Cranston had Say My Name as his episode submission, and it was good, but I don't think it was the fireworks display that is Ozymandias. I always have to look down to get the name just right. 2 years ago when he lost, Cranston again, he submitted Crawl Space, which was terrific at the end. He had a really good explosive scene there at the end. And he lost to Damian Lewis, lost to Jeff Daniels last year. And to your point about the episodes, Paul, let's linger on that. If we learned anything last year, it's that they're watching the episodes because it's the only possible explanation for Jeff Daniels winning because he had the big sanctimonious speech at the beginning of his episode, We Just Decided To, I think was the name of it. And, or no, was that wrong? Anyway, he does all this kind of emotional grandstanding there. However, before we started this Slugfest, Paul and I were chit-chatting, and you brought up the year of Kyle Chandler winning the same award. And I look back, and that was a year that Cranston was not nominated.
That's right.
And he won for always. He wasn't eligible. Right. And Kyle Chandler, which was none of us saw that coming, so that's apropos again of this question: did they watch the episodes or didn't they watch the episodes? And he always was the finale for Friday Night Lights. Connie Britton submitted it as well. She was much more expressive and dynamic in her performance in that than he was, but he had a kind of nice little tender scene there. But he beat John Hamm in The Suitcase. You know, Ham's really bravura up. So then all of a sudden there's a great argument for they don't watch the episodes. Well, here's my argument for switching in the middle of the night last night to back to Cranston, which I had earlier this year. I just rewatched all 3 episodes. Cranston, Woody Harrelson, and McConaughey in the last 72 hours. Because like you said, Paul, we all saw that stuff earlier this year, and you just make these assumptions. Now, in the case of McConaughey, yes, he has the cool factor. He has the Oscar bump. Yes, yes, yes. And he's got all those speeches, as Chris is saying. But the speeches are boring, and he's mumbling all the time. He's just to do with this.
He's acting, Tom. He's acting with a capital A.
God, insufferable. The only emotional, expressive emotion he's got in this whole thing is at the end of his own episode, where he has a crying scene there in the hospital, and of course that's then fade to black. But he does have other advantages. He has 2 episodes, of course. They see 2 performances. Those voters do, and they see two episodes. With 2 performances in 2 episodes, they actually see 3 performances in 2 episodes, because he is giving. He's got the dual role there himself in the what was it, 12 years ago, and now today. He's got all of that going for him. However,
sounds great, doesn't it, Chris? Sounds good. It sounds good, Tom. You've convinced us. Let's move on.
But these 2 episodes that Cranston lost for in recent years are no match for Ozymandias, which I watched it, as I said last night, and was so blown away. It was a nuclear blast of a performance that nothing stands in its path. Last year, yes, we were all caught up in the Breaking Bad fever, and the voters may have said, okay, they bent to it in every which direction, except for Cranston. But I don't know. Chris, have I convinced you?
No, when we do other races, I will be very convincible. But this one, I'm not going to take the time to even rethink it. Matthew McConaughey, he has not lost a race in ever.
Okay,
he won every single film race he could, and I just don't think he's losing this TV race. He even won the critics, the TCA, a couple of weeks ago, and they had Breaking Bad as the program of the year. So
because they wanted the movie star there to eat their.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you.
Yeah. No, but now I am. Chris is steadfast on this one. I am much more, as everyone knows, malleable. I will go with the wind. I'm the last person to update my predictions right before I turn off the prediction center. So I am completely convincible. What do you think, Chris, that it matters that it pretty much universally we're agreed that Breaking Bad's going to win drama series, and a lot of people think that Aaron Paul and Anna Gunn are going to win as well. Is there anything to the sweep? In other words, I know it's different panels voting for these different categories, but if it's in the ether that it's going to be a Breaking Bad sweep, does that give Cranston any hope? Chris?
That's a good question. Emmys don't. And I haven't looked at the history on this. I didn't know this question would come up. But I mean, when's the last time a series won 3 acting awards in one night? If anything, and I know that we have different panels, and whenever I say something like this, I'll always get private messages about, well, it's different voters and all this. I understand that, but I'm talking about when you look back the day after, a week later, and you're going, oh, I wish I had thought about that. The way kind of history unfolds, I just don't think Breaking Bad's going to win 3 acting awards, plus potentially a writing or directing, plus drama series. They do like to spread the wealth. This is the one biggest spot that they can reward True Detective, and I'm very impressed by McConaughey's performance. It was the talk of the industry. Might have helped him even win the Oscar.
Oh, it did help him win the Oscar.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. So, no, does it? I mean, this idea though of Breaking Bad, Tom, that it's yesterday's news, it's out of date. I mean, I did notice that AMC very wisely had a binge Breaking Bad marathon over I think it was all weekend long or something. I mean, it was going on and on and on, as marathons should. So what do you think, that it's a year out of date? Does that matter?
I don't think that matters at all. I think that if they're voting on these episodes, these judges, of which there'll be 50, 75 is all, and they're pretentious actor types, and they are, then they're voting for the big Shakespearean stuff. And Cranston commands the screen throughout that Ozymandias episode. It begins with him out in the desert. He is going through an emotional journey, which is really interesting to watch. So it's not just big, flashy, grandstanding acting there, where he has many speeches, many, and probably the most poignant of them all is the one at the end, where he is screaming to his wife on the phone while they're being taped by the cops right there. He goes through a whole journey of where he's trying to kill Aaron Paul, and then all of a sudden, is his friend again. He is threatening his wife and children, and then at the end, he's saving his wife in that speech on the phone. All of a sudden, midway through, you realize, oh my God, he realizes that he's being eavesdropped on by the cops, and he's making this speech saying, you don't know what's going on. I've never kept you in the filled you in on what's happening. You've always been, so he's trying to get her off the hook later with this as evidence to be sprung. And all of a sudden you realize the decency in this man. There's so many layers of things going on there, and this is true greatness. This is possibly the greatest episode of one of the greatest series in the history of television, and everything else pales to it. I'm sorry. It took me rewatching this thing last night to realize again the impact of this thing, which we all took for granted because all of those episodes as we watched that series wind down last year were really great, and the finale was spectacular. But this, above all others in the history of that show in the 5 years, really towers over it. So if they watch the episodes, forget it, Matthew. Stay home.
Now, let's say half of them watch, half of them don't watch all of them. The voting, we talked about this before, but this idea of taking those names, writing 1 through 6, counting them up, is there a possibility, do either of you think, that there's sort of a Cranston camp and there's a McConaughey camp, and each of them gets a substantial number of 1 votes, but they're ranked pretty low down on everyone else's ballot? Could Kevin Spacey sneak down the middle? Is there any chance for that 2-time Oscar winner to finally get an Emmy? Tom,
because
what do you think?
Yes, because he's everybody's number 2 vote. That's a fascinating. Yes, that's a fascinating point because as we have recently explored more and more the actual voting process, which is the lowest score wins. The voter ranks these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and the lowest score wins. We were under the mistaken notion previously that it was like the Oscars where only number 1 votes count, but this is very different. So also, if you weigh this voting system, here's something else. Let's say. And this actually bodes well for McConaughey, which is if you're voting for Kevin Spacey, your number 2 vote's probably going to be McConaughey because overall he's got that cool factor. If you don't see the greatness of Cranston's episode or you haven't watched it again because you saw it once before, then the argument can be made that McConaughey is everybody's number 1 or number 2. And the same will not be true for Cranston. So therefore, McConaughey wins. Chris, that's the only way that I can see it happening.
I could see Spacey winning. That finale of the season was so good for him, and we'll talk about Robin Wright on another chat. Now, it wasn't good for her. But as you talk about this, I'm also thinking about that person that marks McConaughey in first. Let's say they're being strategic and they're going to mark Cranston down. That person, 5 or 6. Is Woody Harrelson Is Woody Harrelson every McConaughey's second choice?
Interesting.
Could he Barry Pepper his way into a win here?
That's right. We have to remember those 100-to-1 shots at Gold Derby often, and they remark upon that on the red carpet. Why am I even here? They do end up with Emmys sometimes, like Chris.
It's a lot of speeches too. And is in both of those episodes just as much as McConaughey, and as a past Emmy winner. So it's a thought. It's a really interesting race. I do think John Hamm can't probably win this year, but look out for him next year when Cranston's gone, McConaughey's gone, Harrelson's gone, and it's the final season of Mad Men. Spacey could be similar because there's talk that House of Cards next year might be they may only do 3 seasons of that, so you could have like a Spacey-Hamm showdown next year. And Daniels, I liked Newsroom as much as Tom did, but I don't think this episode could win it for him. He doesn't have that
He doesn't
grandstand.
have a speech here. The only speech he's got in this episode is briefly when he's on air, sitting there at the table with his colleagues. He talks about why he's a Republican, and it starts building. You think, oh, this is going to be one big purple recitation, and it ends right away. So he doesn't have that same kind of soapbox this year.
Hmm.
So Paul, you're the wishy-washy one. Where do you stand on all this now?
I'm one of those people that's guilty. I haven't gone back like you have to watch the Cranston episode. I'm going to do that. I'm going to go back and watch it again, and at that point, I'll decide. But well, no, actually, I won't decide probably until moments before I turn off the prediction center. But I'm now I can see the argument that you're making, Tom, about Cranston.
The other fascinating thing here is you've got the defending Tony Awards champion from this year, Cranston, and the defending Oscar champion this year in McConaughey. I wonder if that's ever happened before. In other words, Cranston has had a major awards victory even more recently than McConaughey.
Right, and then back to Spacey, though, there's a guy with a couple of Oscars and a Tony, and he just can't win a darn Emmy. I mean, he's been nominated for different things and over the years for acting and just can't win. So I don't know. I don't think that
if they base their vote on the tapes, there is no rival to Cranston. The question is, will they or not? Last year we saw these upsets like Merritt Wever, Tony Hale, which were way down in our prediction odds, and the reason we had them way down was their episodes were like, at least Merritt Wever's was okay. But there was the likability factor, and she was everybody's number 2 or 3 vote, and that's how she ended up winning. So we now have to be very sensitive to all these issues.
Well, I disagree with you on the episodes. I'm not going to be one, if McConaughey wins, that goes, well, they didn't watch the episodes. They wanted the recent Oscar winner. I think he's extremely good. He was the talk of the industry, not only for Dallas back in the February, March time frame, but also for True Detective, and has turned his career completely around. And he was really the lightning rod for that particular show. So I think if voters go either direction, I think they watch the episodes.
But Chris, his speeches are so monotone and blah, 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 blah. They're not really.
Like Paul said, though, that's acting. I mean, taking Matthew McConaughey and making him a little bit boring, I mean, that's acting.
In Dallas Buyers Club, he's really being theatrical and he's bombastic and all that. Here in True Detective, he's just mumbling.
But what's he like in real life? He's more of that
laid back surfer dude, right?
That's right. So I mean, you can tell that he's really toning it down to play this character, and this character is not toned down all the time. I mean, he gets all these rants, and if I was an actor and I was voting, he would very much impress me. Not to take anything away from Cranston. Cranston would probably win this in a cakewalk if it wasn't for McConaughey.
And just to be clear and clarify, is it just actors are voting? The only people on the panel are people in the acting branch.
Yes, there was, Chris, there may be an exception to that. A couple years ago, they were talking about letting some casting directors in.
That's true. Casting directors are allowed to vote on the acting.
Okay, but it is just to be mindful of it. It's different than the Oscars, everyone, where the branches nominate and then everyone votes. This is a case where it's only actors are looking at this, with the exception of a few casting directors, and deciding which is the best actor. Well, the other big difference there is, and if people don't follow the Emmys like we do, is Oscars can get into a big groupthink because you're talking about thousands of people voting when you get to the winners stage, and they do look at all of the precursors that are happening in those weeks leading up. Here, you've got a small panel of just actors and a few casting directors, maybe 70 people roughly, and they're required to watch. So the groupthink, that's why you see more upsets at the Emmys. The groupthink doesn't happen nearly as often. Oh, and to the point that I expect the majority of them do watch, because they are signing an attestation that they have done that. It's virtually an affidavit saying that they have committed to watching the episodes. So, and if they've volunteered, one would think that they are
Every single actor I've ever spoken to, judges, they watch them. They really they consider it a privilege. And
all right, then I don't want to hear from any of you afterwards when you're wrong that they didn't watch the episodes. That's okay. There you go.
Well, they do watch it, but they could still be swayed by other things like Merritt Weaver. Oh, we just like her. She's just she's chubby. She's a social misfit, just like me in Hollywood. I'm an actor, and I feel out of it. And but
No.
you don't know, there are all these psychological factors going on.
But Tom, to your point, that could have been a race where the number ones were split among a lot of people, and she was everyone's second choice. So, and we're talking about the voting for a sec. The number one votes matter only if they do the score and there's two people with the lowest score. They'll go back and see which of those two got the most number one votes. If they got the same, then they go and look at the number twos. They don't seem to want to have ties at the Emmys. Which is too bad because it can be fun. In the old days, they used to have them. In the old days.
Okay. Any final thoughts, Chris? I know you're immovable here, but you shall regret it, my dear Derby.
Well, listen, if people want to watch other chats that we're recording, I will be movable because I really this one. There are several categories this year. I'm not going to take the anxiety of moving around when I'm convinced.
Ooh,
see, but that's the worst reason, Chris. And you started there too in this discussion, which is I'm just not going to rethink it. I can't be bothered. Well, you know what? We still have 8 days to go, whatever it is, 12 days to go before the Emmys. There's time to rethink it. That's what the fun part of this is. We don't know. We have to give the best performance by a pundit pretending we do, and then we get humiliated every year. But sometimes we offer insight into these races that's kind of fun for people like you guys watching these things.
Well, I did go back and watch. I had seen several of these when they aired, and what I was looking for, especially between Cranston and McConaughey, was, am I wrong here? I mean, it's not like I was totally, but I didn't see anything in McConaughey's that made me go, well, maybe not. And then when you throw in Harrelson's on top of that, I mean, the fact that he had the double submission, I just thought, I'm not going to be swayed here. I think it's a done deal.
Double submission, double roll, Oscar in his back pocket. I know, and a crying scene at the end. McConaughey's got a lot going for him, but he's no Bryan Cranston. I'm taking the last word with that thought. Thanks for watching. Good luck making your own predictions. Paul's going to shut off the prediction center like a couple hours before the Emmys, so you have time to think this through. But first, go back and watch these episodes that we're talking about. Thanks.